When I was learning SEO over 10 years ago, something that I loved to watch was the founder of Moz doing this weekly series called Whiteboard Friday. Moz, legendary piece of SEO software. I actually think it's the best software for getting results because of its on-page grader tool and SERP analyzation tool. And the founder of this software, his name is Fishkin. He also was partially responsible for exposing the Google leak back in May. He had this thing, Whiteboard Friday. Every week, he talked about a different aspect of marketing or search engine optimization. And I watched so many of his Whiteboard Fridays. After he left the company, somebody else started doing it. It just wasn't as good. Now I think someone else does it. It's not the same. But Rand Fishkin, he is a legend, and his Whiteboard Fridays were so great. And so for today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to take a Rand Fishkin Whiteboard Friday. I'm going to share it because it was not only a video, but it also was transcribed into an article. So I'm going to share bits of this article along with my own thoughts. That is what I got for you on this episode. And this topic from Rand Fishkin, this Whiteboard Friday, is called The Best Way to Suck at Marketing. And it's a concept that I genuinely believe in. I was thinking about sharing something else that was trending on the entrepreneur subreddit, but I read it and I said to myself, I don't really believe in this, but the best way to suck at marketing, this is what I believe in. But what is the best way to suck at marketing? So this is what Rand says, and I agree with this. Imagine we have our marketer, and our marketer has good intentions, but our marketer goes out and looks at every opportunity with the same lens on. So the marketer goes out and looks at partnerships and sees only the possibility of business development, or goes out and looks at other blogs and other places in the industry where they might contribute and sees only a guest post opportunity, a chance to earn a link. Goes and looks at their landing pages and sees potential customers coming to their site and thinks only how many and what's the highest percentage of these people that I can possibly convert to have them put in their credit card right now and buy something or make a transaction. That's what they think about when the potential customers are coming to their site and their landing pages. What's the highest percentage of these people that I can convert? Or maybe they look at conferences and events and they see only, all right, how do I speak there? Or should I sponsor it? Or how do I get the most customers that I possibly can out of this event? How do I get coverage from press, media, and bloggers? How do I turn this advertising placement into an ROI? How do I turn these people on social media who are interested in my topic into people who follow me, become my customers, and amplify my content? And what this is, and maybe you're already able to tell as I was saying it, how do I do this and turn these people into this? It's a transactional model of thinking. It's really similar to a lot of the discussions going on in the marketing field. I, Edward Sturm, am guilty of this myself. Rand also, when he talks about this, he says he's guilty of it. I know lots of other people who are guilty of it. I talk about this in my podcast. I talk about this on episodes, turning people who are viewing a video into followers and customers, all these things. And these are important topics. They're good tactics. But this idea that all these people are just a chance to make money, just an opportunity. And now this is Rand's language, but I actually agree with it. And Rand says it's almost like the prostitution of marketing. If you think about the difference between dating and paying for a physical relationship, they're thought of in such different ways. One has all sorts of positive and romantic and long-term associations with the world, and the other has incredibly negative connotations. I won't get into the morality of our different views on these things, but this same thinking applies in the marketing world. We've all been on the receiving end of it. We've all been these people who are reached out to by this transactional marketer. Transactional marketing results in only one thing: transactional relationships. Those transactional relationships are representative because every interaction is viewed exclusively through "this is how you are going to become money for me," which is an ugly, ugly way to think and an ugly way to be thought of. We all can feel it when it's coming from somebody else. It means treating people merely as conduits. They're conduits for either attracting or becoming customers. When you think in this model, you prioritize something that's actually dangerous to your long-term success, your short-term success. It's funny how the inverse correlation works. But if you're constantly focused on the short-term return over the long-term relationship, or relationship potential, the transactional model means that people and customers are going to abandon your brand as soon as it is no longer the best transaction for them because they have no pre-existing relationship. They have no loyalty. They have no love for you or your company or your product. It's merely, what are you doing for me right now because I'm giving you dollars? No one is cheering for your success. That's so frustrating. How do you build a community? How do you build a social following? How do you attract an audience if no one's cheering for your success? These folks are somewhere between ambivalent and sometimes antagonistic. I'm sure you can think of brands. A good example is utilities. Think of your relationship with your cable television provider or with an airline with whom you've been very disappointed. These kinds of classic transactional models apply. There's no brand loyalty. Occasionally when there is, it's so special, so unique, so rare and weird that we talk about it and blog about it and tweet about it and share it. Perhaps the worst part is there's no long-term magnification. That's why authenticity right now in 2024 is so important. Authenticity with your writing, with social media, with newsletters, with podcasts, and whatever it is. Anyway, one of the things that I love is investing in channels where I can build a relationship, where we are essentially biasing to get long-term returns over short-term returns. That means over the long term, more and more people magnifying, amplifying, saying nice things, helping us out when they don't need to, because they have that connection with the brand. That's why Rand was doing Whiteboard Fridays, and he put so much work into his Whiteboard Fridays. And the early Moz, what's so funny, I gotta actually interrupt this to say, this is hilarious. So I think Moz now is mostly owned by private equity, and they have switched to this method of transactional thinking. And the only reason why I still recommend them is because they have these tools in. But if they drop these tools that I mentioned, which is the SERP analysis tool and the Moz on-page grader, I would stop using it. And I've been a customer for I think a decade. I would stop using it, and I would recommend to everybody to stop using it. But so far I haven't seen any other SEO suites that offer the same thing. And especially ones that don't do it as well. The SERP analysis tool combined with the Moz on-page grader makes it really easy to see gaps in keyword coverage. And then also, if you're new to how to optimize a page, shows you exactly the best ways to optimize a page for a keyword. And now I understand it so well because I've used this tool so much that I don't even need the Moz on-page grader to test my content. I just know what I'm doing. I know how to optimize for these keywords now. But I still use a SERP analysis tool to look at opportunities for keyword gaps. But if they took all of that away, because Moz is owned by private equity now and they don't care about their customers, not like they used to, and they really used to. Rand's Moz, when Rand was in it, they cared. Rand's Moz cared a ton. And he left many years ago and I'm still a customer because of that. But the private equity side, the transactional side, has just been slowly chipping away at this trust. And I can get into more examples of conversations that I've had with Moz leadership where it's just very clear that it's a business. It's not a relationship-oriented thing with their customers, which is what Rand Fishkin's business had. And that's what I'm doing with all of my businesses, and especially with this podcast, especially with compact keywords, especially with my daily short-form videos. I think it's part of the reason why so often you hear about private equity coming and taking a huge chunk of a company and then that company dies a few years later. Don't get me wrong. Figuring out how to optimize a business is crazy important. Figuring out how to get more customers from a landing page is crazy important. But what you see is a lot of these short-term moves at the expense of the long term. And then a few years later, the businesses are done. All right, I'm going to continue Rand Fishkin now. If you're missing that connection to the brand, the flywheel that you should be building with things like SEO, with things like social media marketing, with things like content marketing encounters too much friction, and it actually becomes a transactional model, just like paid advertising. You lose a ton of the benefit that you would normally get from inbound channels. So don't do it. Instead of doing this, I would urge you to seek common ground with every kind of relationship that you can build, and seek common ground apart from purely the relationship, although business and professional topics are certainly great places to start with those. If you can find the things that you have in common, among any of the partners that you're interacting with and any type of outreach that you're doing, any type of relationship that you encounter, it's going to remove the purely transactional from the model. Find the things that you have in common. That's great, solid, tangible advice. When you look for commonalities with your partners or the people you're doing business with, that actually builds a relationship. And it has to be authentic. You can't do this in such a way that you're sort of going down a checklist of, oh yeah, hi Fred, it's nice to meet you. Are you also a Seahawks fan? Because I am a fan of this football team too. It's insanity. It's obvious. Authentically seeking out relationships as you're going relationship building rather than biasing and prioritizing the transactional model can be felt in every interaction that you have. Go out of your way to help. Go out of your way to help and do it before you're asked to do it. One of the things that I love to do is when I encounter someone who impresses me, a product that impresses me, a company that impresses me, I like to share it because I have a reasonably nice social following that actually turns into a lot of amplification, and those people are often very appreciative. But when someone shares something of mine, even if they have 5 followers on Twitter, no presence on Facebook, they pin something on Pinterest, and they have 4 followers on their Pinterest board, it doesn't matter. Especially if they're doing it before there's any kind of interaction or before there's any kind of ask from me. It shows me that they truly care and they truly value something of mine, and that feels good. That's a great way to start a relationship. Don't negotiate hard to get every last penny. I think that one of the things that we're trained to do, again, as marketers is, in these kinds of marketing opportunities, we go out and see, well, what's the maximum that I can possibly get? I'm going to push this other person up against the wall until they're getting minimum return and I'm getting maximum return. This is actually a terrible way to build a relationship. Of course, it results in this feature where people abandon the brand as soon as you're not providing the best service to them or as soon as you're not the best transactional option for them. By the way, when you have a good relationship with people, if you're not doing something well, people will warn you like a million times before they leave you. They will help you to make what you are doing better for them so that they don't leave you. So if you can follow these things and go change the way that you do outreach, the way that you do social media marketing, the way that you do business development, the way that you do advertising placements, the way that you do pitches, I think you're going to see a much greater return. And that is the best way to suck at marketing from Rand Fishkin. I have a guide on my website. If you go to edwardstrom.com/articles and you search for networking, I have what I learned about networking going to NYC tech and business events every night for 3 years. And then on the second page, I have something called Things I've Learned About Networking to Sell a Service. There's something that these 2 articles have in common. And I learned this the hard way because when I was starting to sell SEO services over a decade ago, when I was doing SEO consulting, I was going to tech meetups and business meetups every day, every night to try to get customers, to try to get clients. And at first I started with this transactional way of thinking. And when I shifted my thinking to, I'm going to try to become friends with all of these people, I started getting so much more business. So instead of just going to people, shaking hands and saying, hi, I'm Edward, I do SEO, I would go up to people and just talk to them and ask them about their life and their business. And it wouldn't be until like 20 or 30 minutes into the conversation when they would find out that I did SEO, because I would just keep asking them about them and learning about them. And finally, they'd get bored talking about themselves. They'd be curious who I am. They'd say, who are you? What do you do? And I'd say, oh, I do SEO. And they say, oh, I know someone who needs that. I'd be like, cool. And I would continue talking to them about them. And then their friend would hit them up and be like, hey, do you know anyone who does SEO? And they'd be like, yes, Edward Sturm. And this happened so many times. The best way for me to sell was to become friends with people. And so then what I started doing is I said, okay, I'm going to become friends with people, but where can I become friends with people who actually not just need my services, more importantly, know people who need my services, because referrals always convert better. So I would go and I would become friends with people who had friends who needed SEO. So I would go to like web development meetups, for example. And then the web developers, they'd be my friends. We would just have a great time hanging out. And they'd also be like, oh yeah, I met someone who needs SEO. Can you talk to him or her? And I'd be like, sure. And this happened so many times. But it happened because I stopped thinking from this transactional lens to this relationship building lens. And actually, some of those people who I became friends with, in order to get more SEO customers. Some of those people are some of my best friends today. One of them was on this podcast. His name is Alan Goldman, and he was on this podcast a few months ago back when I was home in New York City. I talk to Alan every day. He's just a great friend. We've done businesses together. So, okay, I love this from Rand. The best way to suck at marketing. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, if you were watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, if you were listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And thank you, Rand Fishkin, for being awesome and an inspiration to me and for getting me going on my path of SEO so long ago. Everybody, I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.